Guys, Firebed here, and I want to talk to you guys today about the newest expansion in Hearthstone called Whispers of the Old Gods. If you want to hear what I have to say about a specific card, just click the picture of the card below and it'll take you to the point in the video where I talk about that card. Alright, Corrupted Healbot. So this card is a 5 mana 6/6 that has Death Rattle, restore 8 health to the enemy hero. Now, the first thing I immediately noticed about this card when I saw it presented to me was Alchemy Soul Priest synergy. You can change the Death Rattle effect, which normally would be negative to you, and turn it into a positive, which is insane. And then, I thought immediately the next level, how can you take that one step farther? So, you can get Alchemy Soul Priest in your Priest deck. You can also run Thoughtsteal in your Priest deck. Thoughtsteal of Feign Death, play 2 Corrupted Healbots, and then just play 2 copies of Feign Death, and burst people for, how much damage is that? 32 damage. That can be a lot of damage. Another thing I noticed about it is that it's a mech, which is interesting because GVG is cycling out in Standard. So in GVG the mechs are gone. So that's going to really limit this card's potential unless new mechs are introduced, which may be some foreshadowing about what's coming in the rest of the set with additional mech cards being added. Next, alright, so we have Polluted Hoarder, which is a 4 mana, 4/2, and has Death Rattle, draw a card. First sight of this card, it is weak. I think it's very weak. I mean, a 4/2 body is normally attached to a 3 mana minion. BGH most commonly is the one everyone's going to think of. And that kills something with 7 attack when it comes into play, which is a devastatingly powerful effect for any card. And then it has a 4/2 body attached to it. This card's effect is just draw a card, which is not devastatingly powerful. And it costs even more mana than BGH. I can't imagine this card seeing too much play. Next we have Validated Doomsayer. Now this card's really interesting. It's a 5 mana 0/7, but then its effect is at the start of your turn, set this minion's attack to 7. So where I see this coming into play is it requires you to be ahead on board. So your opponent has no minions on board, you're dominating the board, maybe some sort of zoo deck, something like that that has really good board control, and then your opponent has no minions to react to it, so then its attack value doesn't really matter that it's 0, because the only way they can interact with the card is then with removal spells out of hand, or I guess charge minions to some extent. And so, either whatever its attack value is at that point is going to be interacted the same way. And so if you have board control, it is like a 7/7 automatically, and then it sticks around and becomes a 7/7 the next turn, which is actually beneficial because your opponent can't BGH the turn it comes into play then, so that you're guaranteed in an aggro or a rush deck to get in that 7 damage. So I can actually see it being quite effective and see potentially a lot of play. The biggest downside of this card, though, is if you're playing against a priest and you play it on turn 5, and then their follow-up play on turn 6 is Cabal Shadow Priest, and now they have a 7/7, and you don't have anything, and you're really sad. So up next we have Cthun, which is the kind of the big news of the release here. This is a 10 mana 6/6 that has Battlecry, deal damage equal to this minion's attack randomly split among all enemies. And this card is really exciting, and the biggest reason why it's exciting is because it's a 10 mana card that seems like it could be playable. None of the currently high costing legendaries are really playable unless you reach a point where the board's at sort of like an equilibrium and you know you can play it without getting killed by your opponent or interacting with your opponent's board at all, because most turns you have to remove something from your opponent and then develop something. Well, Cthun tries to remove things from the board and develop something big, and also has the potential to lethal your opponent if you're able to get him large enough, which can be quite possible with the announcement that there's going to be 16 cards in the new expansion that are going to buff Cthun. So potentially that means there's since you can run all 2-ofs, you could have Cthun and then 29 cards that buff it. But I'm not sure on that because some of those cards are most likely going to be class specific. Like I imagine Priest is going to have a lot of buffing of Cthun cards because they have cultists and it fits the theme of Priest and that whole thing. But who's to say right now? Nobody really knows. The one thing for sure, though, I think Cthun is going to be insane in a rogue deck. Cthun, you can Shadow Step it and just re-have the amazing effect of dealing its attack damage randomly split among all enemies. You're going to be able to do a lot of cool things with this card. It kind of reminds me of Reno, in a sense, where you build a deck around this card, and it's going to be pretty epic. So I'm really excited to see what people can come up with Cthulhu. I'm really excited to see it in Rogue with Shadow Stepping the Cthulhu buffers and Shadow Stepping Cthulhu itself, playing a Bran, Shadow Stepping the Bran so that the Bran only costs 1 mana, and then getting an Emperor tick on either Cthulhu or your Bran so that you can play Bran and Cthulhu in the same turn, burst people for, 20, 30 damage depending on how big you can get the Cthulhu while clearing their whole board. There's going to be some things that could potentially get a little busted with it. So I'm really excited about this card. I definitely think it's going to find itself to be extremely powerful in at least one archetype. And even if it doesn't find itself to be, like, super powerful across the board, it's going to create a deck that is different playstyle. Like, all the cards that you build a deck around create a different archetype of deck. We can even, like, look at Patron, for example, is a card you can build a deck around. So it's a really creative and cool card. And that creates an entirely new archetype, a new different way to play the game, which is exciting and fun for me. Like, definitely, I don't want to just druid people. I don't want to play mid-rangey things. And then you have things like Reno, which create a different deck archetype with Reno Lock, which just changes the way you would play Warlock. Well, it's really similar to Handlock, so it didn't change it too much. But Cthulhu is going to change the way you play Hearthstone. It's going to create a brand new archetype, and I think that's really exciting, and I like to see that in card design. Beckoner of Evil. Now this card is a 2-mana 2/3 with Battlecry, give your Cthulhu +2/+2 wherever it is, regardless if it's in your deck, in your hand, or on the field. So this is a pretty solid card just because of its stat line. Like a 2-mana 2/3 sees play currently. Like you can see Flame Juggler saw play, it has a pretty underwhelming Battlecry effect, and Sunfury Protector regularly sees play. Like 2-mana 2/3s are good stats. And then it has a really interesting effect. So if you don't know what Cthulhu is, it's kind of hard to put this card in perspective, but giving anything a +2/+2 on a good stat line minion is good. That's a pretty solid effect. I could see this getting a lot of play in Cthulhu decks. Next we have Twilight Elder. Now this is a 3-mana 3/4. At the end of your turn, give your Cthulhu +1/+1 wherever it is. Just like the last card, wherever it is, regardless if it's in your hand, deck, on the field, anything. Which is a really cool effect. And something to note about this effect, aside from its just pretty sweet stat line of a 3-mana 3/4, is that the effect happens at the end of your turn every time at the end of your turn. Like if this minion is able to persist on the field, the effect is repeatedly going to fire off. So your Cthulhu is going to be able to get bigger and bigger, and the card can act as an engine. Maybe you can have some stalls incorporated, some sort of like Freeze Mage Cthulhu deck, where you get these guys down and use Frost Novas and things like that to make sure that your Cthulhu buffers stay around and buff your Cthulhu to as big as it can possibly get. So there's some interesting potential with this card. I don't think it's as good as the Beckoner of Evil, just because a 3/4 stat line I don't think is as good as a 2/3. We see a lot of 2/3s in play in the game currently. We don't see too many 3/4s in play. Like, not very many people play Spider Tank. Like, it's an acceptable stat line, but it's not an exceptional stat line. That's all we know so far. If you have any questions, post it in the comments. I do read the comments. Even if it takes a while, I will be reviewing the cards as they release, so be sure to subscribe so you get the notification of when that video goes live, and follow me on all the links below my face to get more of the bat. It has to be enough, so that's why I'm not counting it. Like, it either is or it isn't. I'm excited for the suspense. Holy shit.